All right, so this is gonna be part 2 of our 1970 911 RSR build that we're doing. Next up, I'm gonna tackle the rear end. We're waiting for a couple things still to come in, but try and get the whole rear suspension in place. And then I have to rebuild the whole steering column assembly, get that up in the car, and then go from there. All right, now that we got these rear arms back from powder coat again, I'm gonna press in new bearings here, bushings, and keep assembling. All right, so I'm gonna assemble the whole steering housing and steering column assembly. This is the old intermediate shaft and knuckles, or U-joints, I mean. This guy might be kind of hard to see. This shaft is actually bent. So we had another one laying around that was in good condition. So we blasted that, had the main center part of it powder coated. Brand new U-joints, cleaned this housing up. This is for the upper steering shaft. Brand new bearings for inside of here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and assemble all this stuff and then we can get that in the car. We also got new lower billet bearing. This is from Redline. It's like a outer rubber bushing and then a bearing inside with needle bearings. A lot of times this thing will the outer will just kind of disintegrate and sometimes the needle bearings will fall apart. So your steering will feel a little notchy. So this is a good upgrade. Billet aluminum on the outside and then brand new bearing on the inside. So we'll throw that in while we're in there. I'm gonna start assembling the steering column. So first thing, I'm just gonna get this lower bearing on the rack in place there. And then I'll work my way up to the steering housing that goes inside. So we got the whole steering shaft assembly in the car. Right off the bat, ran into a few issues with the new joints. I'll show you over here at the table. So we have an original shaft, and then these are the original joints that we had. Eyeballing the new ones and the old ones, they looked identical. Once I got it all together, I pulled it off and pulled some measurements. The whole new assembly ended up being 3/8 of an inch shorter overall, which threw off all the angles and where it needed to sit. I noticed the holes here where the bolts go through, they locate in that notch on the shaft. These holes where they're drilled out on the new joints are drilled down just a hair, so it shortened the whole assembly up. So to account for that, I ended up actually re-notching the new shaft slightly further up just to be able to extend the whole assembly that 3/8 of an inch overall so that could fit properly. With it just that little bit too much short, this lower bearing here didn't want to sit in place where it needed to, and the shaft here was down too far. So got that all taken care of, good to go. We got some fresh new rear wheel hubs. We're still waiting on some other parts for the rear. So while I was waiting on that, I decided I'd go through the whole pedal assembly that we had, parking brake assembly, the clutch cables, throttle cables, speedo cables, all the heater cables running through the center of the car that you see there. Those are the old ones. It's all gonna be brand new. This was an existing parking brake lever mechanism. I'm gonna go through this. We're gonna refurbish it all. A lot of the pieces underneath here, the clevises and ratchet and all that is still totally good. So we'll clean that up, reuse it. So this will be like brand new. Pedal assembly. This is the original pedal assembly. You can see here that bushing there is completely worn out. We have a crack here, missing pieces and parts. So we're probably gonna just source a whole new fresh unit. not have to deal with that. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm gonna tear apart the parking brake assembly, and I might start going through the wiring harnesses that we have, start getting that laid out and placed in the car while the car is just bare, make it a little bit easier to handle. So yeah, I think that's all I have for right now. Okay, so we just sent out a bunch of stuff to powder coat. We're waiting on some pieces to come in to refinish some parts. I went ahead and pulled out all of the cables through the tunnel of the car. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. The throttle cable, clutch cable, parking brake cables, speedo, brake line, fuel line. These are all just kind of crusty, not in the best shape. So we got all brand new stuff. So you can see the back here, all the stuff that's going on. There's solid tubes that run from the rear all the way to the front. Went through and cleaned those all out with air to get any debris and whatnot that was stuck in there. So yeah, we're gonna start running all of those cables through, and then hopefully by then we'll have new powder coated parts back, some new bushings and whatnot. And then we'll move on to the rear. Just got proper rear coilovers for the rear. We'll get the spring plates back in, trailing arms, and should be pretty good at that point to make it a roller. All right, so we got all of these cables ran through the tunnel here. We're just waiting on a couple boots to come in to be able to seal off some of those holes. So in the meantime, we're gonna jump to the rear suspension. I think we talked about it previously. You got brand new rear wheel hubs. Got those pressed in, studs pressed in. These have all new bearings and bushings in it now. We got a few parts that we were waiting on for this triangulated front strut brace. And then the original coilovers that we got for the rear, they actually sent the wrong ones, so got those swapped out. They actually use a torsion bar through this torsion tube here. So there's a spring plate that attaches to that, and then shocks that go up through here. On the early cars, the opening here isn't big enough for the spring. These are 2.5-inch springs. The opening's not big enough to fit that. Elephant makes two different models or two different style rear coilovers. This is for the early years. It has this longer top hat, so that will fit up there no problem. So we're gonna get these installed. So I just wrapped up a bunch of little loose ends on the rear end here and assembled pretty much all the rear suspension how you see it. As far as like all the cables and functions go, they're all new, operate really smooth now, so that's nice. The rear end, as you can see, got the trailing arms in, the rear spring plates, rear coilovers, the Terra Engineering rear sway bar and end links. So it's pretty much dialed. We're still waiting on rear parking brake assembly to get in, and I can install that, install the rear Brembos. So that'll be pretty cool. All right, so inside the car here, we have the main shift rod that runs the whole length of the tunnel up to here. That goes in from the back side. After that, got a couple of the front components on. We went with Renline's billet piece and their bushing for up front. And then back here, new internal boot, parking brakes, heater cable, all that. This is a numeric shifter, so this thing should be pretty sweet. Feels really good. It's obviously not hooked up to a trans yet, but yeah, that is all in place. Up front here, we were waiting on last couple parts from Elephant to put in this triangulated strut brace. So now we have new rear mounts there, triangulated brace mount down to there. This is all quick release, so you can just pull those pins, pull the bars out if you need to, I guess, access anything. I think next, the main thing I want to do is get all the wiring in place since the car is still pretty bare. We got pretty much a whole new harness from the CDD Auto Gear. I was just kind of going through it. Everything seems to be pretty nice. It's all labeled and whatnot. This is their refuse kit. So it uses your normal spade style fuses. Originally, this car would have had the bullet style fuses. They're pretty outdated now. So this kit converts it to just normal spade fuses, which would be pretty cool. I'm gonna start running all of this now I'll get the fuse blocks in place and then start routing wiring back through the chassis, terminating it where it's supposed to go. Get the gauges in. Yeah, hopefully that all goes pretty smooth. These guys are just way too noisy, man. Look at this guy. Don't do it. Now these ding dongs are done making some noise. So this is...
Got your ass. You don't care. Not anymore.
This is the front portion of the wiring. I'm gonna get ran through the car. These are the main fuse blocks up front. So I'm gonna start with that and then just start routing all of these leads where they need to go. Luckily, all of them look to be terminated and have all the proper connectors on them. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so at this point, I have pretty much all the wiring in place, ran where it needs to be. In the back here, so we have the main parts of the harness that run into the engine bay, the headlight harness, and then this one goes back to a relay panel. The tricky part with this entire harness is running it down through the tunnel. So this main section runs back behind here and then starts at the tunnel where the rest of those cables are. And you have to kind of fish it all the way through. There's a whole separate channel that runs along the inside here for this wiring harness and the starter cable. So once we got that all fished through all of this, that's all good in place now. So, but yeah, the next thing that I'm gonna do is put the gauges in. We had them sent out and completely rebuilt and refinished. So they're pretty much brand new, super fresh. So we just got all the rear parking brake hardware in. So I'm gonna go ahead and assemble all that on the car. And we could put the rear Brembos on. All right, so touching base on a few miscellaneous pieces that were still left out. We were waiting on some bushings and chrome trim pieces for the wiper assembly, so that's now in place and good to go. With all the suspension on, we're able to measure out for wheels. We test fit some 17s just to make sure it'd clear. We really wanted to try and stay with 17s and not have to run 18s on this car. So we have some wheels ordered up. Those are on the way right now. All right, so inside the car here, we have the new gauges all in place. I got the turn signal and wiper stocks on. There were a couple connectors I had to replace and heat shrink, cleaned up all the wiring. These are the original pieces off the car. They're pretty expensive new, and these were still in good enough shape. So we reused those. So my next plan is to go through all the exterior lighting on this car. We have brand new headlights for it, brand new front turn indicators. I'm going through the taillights right now. This is the original one from this car. And we had a couple other sets to pick from. Obviously this one is mangled, so we're not using that. But the best set that I had, I went through and took apart all of the contacts on the back side here. They go through the back and then the bulb goes through the front, makes contact there. The wiring attaches there. I removed all of those so I could sandblast this entire unit. This one is actually in really good shape. There's nothing that I found wrong with it. So I'm gonna recoat that after. This one, was also in really good shape in comparison to all the other ones. There was a tiny little hairline crack. I went through and epoxied right now, so I'm just waiting for that to dry. And then this reflector shield that goes here to block off the marker light, it was just rotted out. This whole housing, the taillight housing, is aluminum, and then these little shields are just sheet metal. So I went and made a new one just so it's not nasty like this. But I'm going to go ahead and epoxy that in place. And then, like I said, recoat all of these. We have brand new lenses for them. I'll reinstall and clean up all the contacts. And then we have a brand new wiring harness, new wiring harnesses for both taillight assemblies. This is a bunch of the old wiring. Obviously, we're not going to use this. It's just nasty. But I'm just going to go ahead and get this little panel epoxied in place and then move forward to recoating the whole taillight assembly. All right, so we have the taillights here. This one's all assembled and ready to go. They're all cleaned up, freshly coated, brand new wiring harness. I went through and removed all the contacts on the inside and cleaned those up, re-epoxied those back in place because the little metal tabs that hold them in are really fragile. It's just kind of extra precaution. I'm just gonna throw this clamp on here just while it tacks up so that seal doesn't fall off, and I'll come adhesive the upper lip. But I'm gonna move on to the front. We have new indicators for the front that are gonna go in. Again, brand new harness, connector, and backing plate. So I'm gonna go and get those in the car. Another thing I went through prior to putting all these clips on in place, just because of the paint, it was a little too thick for them to go on nicely. So all of those behind that I sanded down, and then we have touch-up paint, that's body color. Went through and just dabbed some paint on there so it's covered up. So now those clips go on how they should. Most of the electrical and dash components are in now. We ended up going with one of Redline's backdate dashes, which is pretty cool. Deletes the whole glove box on the passenger side. We also deleted the radio on this car. It's gonna be a very minimalistic car. Along with their backdate dash, we have their billet climate control panel, billet knobs all around, and bezels for the ignition, billet headlight, hazard switch, cigarette lighter. So it's a really clean option in my opinion. Okay, so we measured out wheel sizes, got those sent over to Rotiform. We went 17s all around, which just clear these Brembos, which is cool. The rears are 17/11, -19 offset, and the fronts are 17/9, 0 offset. So I'm happy with how these fit up. They clear everything perfect. There's no weight on the car yet. We don't even have the drivetrain in, and none of the suspension's adjusted, so we'll have to do that after the fact. But yeah, as far as the fitment goes, I think they're spot on. We should be able to run a pretty decent sized tire too. Probably do like a 295 in the rear, maybe a 245 up front. We'll have to mess around with that a little bit and get some tires ordered up, but I'm happy with them. All right, as you can see, we got tires mounted on the wheels now. We had these tires sitting around already, so we figured we'd try them out. They're a 225/45 up front, and then a 265/40 in the rear. We could go a bit bigger, We might play with tire sizes down the road, but at least for now we have something on it so it can roll. So that's pretty cool. I also have the front bumper just mocked up on here for now. We'll touch on this in the next episode, but I have this on so we can fit up front oil cooler, side oil cooler, and then the AC condensers as well. All right, so that's what we have for part 2 of this video. If you guys like what you see, feel free to leave a like, comment, ask a question. We'll get back to you. Stay tuned for the next one.